The ministers will talk Friday, and there'll be a full leaders COAG meeting early next week as well. So plenty going on, as I say, in these final couple of weeks of the year. Let's bring in our panel of political strategists. Grahame Morris here with me in the studio, and Bruce Hawker joining us there from Sydney as well. Very good afternoon to both of you. Let's start on the opinion poll, Newspoll out today though, Grahame. It is, as I said, the third Newspoll in a row to have the government behind by 10 points. That's not good.
All I want for Christmas or New Year or Australia Day or May is a 2-point gap. You know, a 2-point gap, you can go into a campaign and win it.
They had that. They had that under Malcolm Turnbull.
Yeah, but you know, they're all over the place under Malcolm Turnbull. They were just disunited. They're never.
Now they're not?
Never going to. At the moment, the parliamentary team is united behind Scott Morrison. It's true. Some of the branches are a bit all over the place, but they always are. But, yeah, and I don't think anyone has any doubt that if Scott can get it to 51-49, he will campaign 1,000,000 times better than Malcolm Turnbull. Everything we've learnt for 30-odd years, Malcolm decided he knew better, put it in the bin and did it his way. Yeah, Scott will be a good campaigner, but he's got 5 mountains to climb before he gets into a position where the campaign itself will determine the outcome.
OK, but with your experience in this field, Grahame, looking at where the government is now and has been now for 3 surveys, can they win the election?
Look, I think they can. You know, things change, and as we get closer to an election campaign, normally things polarise a bit. And it depends how the government uses the silly season when everyone's up and news is scarce.
What do you reckon they should do? Go quiet or...?
No, God, no. No, they should use it. News is scarce. Everyone's looking for a real story. They should use it. And I think some of the ministers need to get off their backside and get out and do their media work.
Well, Bruce, from where you sit, looking at these polls, what do you think? Is it all over? Is it in the bag for Labor, or is it possible that Morrison can come back?
Look, it's never in the bag until sometime on election night or after. So I don't think the Labor opposition is going to be taking any of this for granted. But it is a real hard ask for the Liberals. And by way of comparison, look at 2013 when Kevin Rudd came back into the leadership after the Gillard years. Labor got a big bounce, and he did a number of significant things, some of which Scott Morrison has followed, like a 2/3 majority requirement to remove a sitting Prime Minister and so forth. Labor actually got a significant bounce, and for a while there, David, we were running at 50-50 with the Abbott opposition, and I think we might have even have crept a little bit ahead. But once the campaign really got into full swing and people were reminded by good advertising or effective advertising by the Liberal Party that Labor had been divided for the last 3 years, it was really all over, because the public doesn't like to see division in its major political parties. And that's unfortunately what the disease that they've all caught in recent years, and it goes for the Liberal Party as well. So my feeling is that this is going to be very hard for the Libs and for the coalition generally, because once we get into the campaign, people will be constantly reminded through paid televising of the stories that have happened in the past
of that division. And look, you're right to point it out, because we saw it in Victoria as well, didn't we? I mean, even the federal Liberal divisions played out, were used by Labor in their campaign advertising in Victoria. Grahame, how does the Liberal Party counter that? I mean, were the leadership changes a week ago tonight enough to tell people we've now drawn a line under that?
Well, I think so. There's a lot of policy stuff to come. The Labor Party still has its conference to get through. We still have a budget to come. Now, there's quite a few things you could bounce off into an election. But look, I agree with Bruce. There's a couple of miracles required. But, you know, I've seen miracles in politics.
Is the border in the past, Grahame, one of those? Sorry, Bruce. Is the border protection debate maybe not a miracle, but an opening? Just to you first, Grahame, on this for the government.
It is, depending on what the Labor Party does. But it is one of those terrible, terrible issues where, if votes started to come again, the coalition support would go through the roof. But because it's under control and we haven't got too many people left,
People aren't so worried.
then people aren't so worried, and it's all, you know, conscious and goody-goody stuff.
Well, Grahame, conscience and goody-goody stuff. But Bruce, I think a lot of Australians do genuinely feel concerned about the plight of those who've been there for 5 years now. But were you surprised to see Bill Shorten open up some difference with the government on this issue? It's been such a vulnerability for Labor in the past.
You mean around the issue of critically ill people in Nauru? Because
Just,
I think...
shifting to a more compassionate support approach on these medical transfers.
Look, I think the public can accommodate that, frankly. I don't think that they see that as being some sort of terrible weakening of protection if you've got some critically ill person in Nauru who has to be treated in order to save their life. I think most Australians are still compassionate enough to say, well, I think we could actually protect the public security in this situation if somebody's like that. We do it every day with people who are criminally convicted in Australia. We have to take them into hospitals and treat them there, and then under guard and close protection. That's not, I think, the big issue here. And I think that most Australians would probably feel a level of sympathy for people in those situations. The government will try to play it up, as we've seen today, but I don't think that that is going to go a long way with the electorate. If, however, Labor were to do something to soften its stance on asylum seekers generally, and it was seen to be some sort of loosening of the hard line on people trafficking, then I think that would be a different story altogether. And we've seen Tony Burke and others absolutely rule that out in advance of the party conference in a weekend's time. So I don't think we're going to see any significant difference between the two parties,
will there be,
except when it comes
Bruce,
to compassion
will there be the numbers
issues.
at the Labor conference for Bill Shorten to have his win on border protection?
Yes, there will be. Labor is in a very strong position, as we've just been discussing. Everybody wants to make sure that Labor doesn't do anything which would amount to shooting itself in the foot. And these are tough, experienced operators. They know that some issues have the electorate's just made a call on, and they're not going to go back down that path again. We saw John Howard in 2001 very cleverly, pluck victory from the jaws of defeat with the Tampa incident, and so things can be turned around in a very short time if the situation demands it, and if the circumstances present themselves as they did with Tampa. But that's not going to be something that's going to happen again.
Far from tough. Why does Penny Wong, Anthony Albanese, Tanya Plebiscite, why do they even turn up to the conference? They turn up and puff out their chests, then they get their tummy tickled, they get their backbone stiffened by Bill Shorten's union mates, and they get rolled every time. Why do they turn up?
Well, Labor's a much broader church than that, and there are a lot of policies where the left has a very significant part to play. And you see that playing out on the conference floor time and time again. Its social policies, for example, are largely driven by activists from the left. A lot of its environmental policies the same. So at the end of the day, Labor actually is going to come up, I believe, with a pretty balanced package of policies to take into platform to take into the 2019 election campaign. It's not divided. This is the story that the Liberal Party really struggles to understand and to believe. The divided party is the Liberal Party, the Coalition, the Greens. For once, the Labor Party is united. It's a stable alternative at a state and federal level, and it's showing in results.
Coming back, Grahame, to this border protection debate, is there a danger for the government that it is seen as too hard-hearted here in arguing against a more compassionate approach on these medical transfers?
Well, there's a bit of that, but geez, there's a lot of hypocrisy in this. We're essentially saying all the kids who are natural Nauruans aren't looked after and are useless, and their parents kids should be taken away from their parents. I reckon it ought to be the other way around, that these illegal immigrants who put their kids in danger, they should lose their kids. I think it's outrageous, and here we are, people tutting about who's left on Nauru and forgetting that there's you know, scores and scores of family who have been living there for 70-odd years.
Yeah, and they get the benefit when they need to of Australian medical aid and assistance. And they fly no ruins to Australia when they need that assistance, because that is our role as a compassionate friend in the Pacific. And I don't think there's anything we're discussing there.
On the ground. They should go home.
Well, the refugees?
Well, there's now more than 800 of them here in Australia who've been transferred for medical reasons. And I guess this is something that both sides haven't really addressed adequately. They can't, as I understand it, apply for a visa under the Migration Act in Australia, but nor is anyone really booting them out, sending them back to Nauru. I know the courts prevented that happening on a lot of occasion. But Bruce, should Labor just say, OK, we'll give them a visa, we'll change the Act, give them a visa, and we're talking about 800 plus people already here. They've got kids, they need to get on with their lives. What should happen to them?
Well, I just think you've got to be very careful about people who have come, as the guest in a way, or paying guests of people smugglers into Nauru, or effectively, ultimately to Nauru. You don't want to send any messages out to those people smugglers again. The point was made and well made that.
So do you leave these people in limbo? I mean,
well, ultimately you may not, but I think while we still have people on Nauru and there's still languishing there, I think you probably have to wait. And then, once those people have been moved elsewhere or have settled in some other way, then I think you can start looking at the Nauruans, the refugees who have been moved out. That's my sense.
This caseload...
Look, if they're illegal and they're not fair income refugees, they should be put on a plane and sent home, or they should be looking for a third country for them. They're not coming to Australia and shouldn't be staying here.
But they're here now. That's the thing.
Yep. Once they've done the medical thing, they go.
All right, we've got to go. We'll see how that Labor conference plays out, and we'll talk to you, both of you, for the final time, this time next week for 2018. As long as you both...
You're talking about reading and writing. I think we need to teach kids bowling and batting.
That's not a bad point. Time for the second test, perhaps. Grahame, Bruce, thank you both very much. All right, we'll talk soon. We're going to take a quick break. Back with the last word.